here with the one and only Brett Wilson at the UCP convention in Calgary. So we just had the Fair Deal panel. What did you think of the panel, and what do you think of the plan?
I think the effort to look at a greater degree of what I call independence rather than separation is a thoughtful and a reasonable approach to where we go next. If we can't get independence, then I think the separatist movement will have some wings, but I really hope that we can build a stronger Alberta inside the Confederation of Canada.
If the Fair Deal were to go through, do you think that that would be enough for people who are very skeptical about the Canadian Confederation? Do you think it would be enough to keep people who might otherwise be separatists in Canada?
If Fair Deal gives us a sense of independence, then I'm happy. Again, we don't need separation to have a thoughtful and working country. But what we need in parallel is a proper pipeline strategy, an export strategy, so that we can start to attack the coal consumption in China with our natural gas. That creates jobs, creates opportunities in Alberta. Bringing the federal, right now, federally regulated Canada Pension Plan under Alberta purview, that creates jobs and opportunities in Alberta. There's a lot of what I'd call consolidation. Creating our own police force creates jobs that are a little more structured around creating a sense of who we are as Albertans. So I'm actually fairly hopeful that if we can move down a path of creating that sense of independence, a sense of self-determination, as we heard Quebec often use, I think we've moved a long way towards meeting the needs of a lot of Albertans.
Justin Trudeau kind of embodies Canada, right? He's the son of a prime minister. His father was the most famous prime minister. And yet in this last election, we saw a resurgence of the Bloc in Quebec and the separatist movement there, and this new Wexit movement pop up in Alberta. So what do you think that says that two different parts of the country want to separate under this iconic Canadian prime minister? What's going on?
Well, there's ever-escalating sense of regionalism happening, and certainly within Quebec, we're seeing that again. And really, the Alberta, Saskatchewan, northern BC, and I'm very heavily invested in the Yukon. There's a lot of unhappy campers in the Yukon, and then I'm very close and working strategically with a number of First Nations, many of whom are unhappy with this sense of regionalism that's been created by the ability of this Prime Minister to tear apart Confederation. We're not doing a very good job of keeping Canada together as a whole, and I do blame one man for that effort.
Why do you think he got reelected then?
It stuns me when I sit down and talk with my peers in Ontario, even the greater GTA, and they go, we don't know. We voted in favor of something that was more thoughtful. So whether it's immigration or a vote for and in favor of immigrants or by immigrants, but the Liberal Party managed to land a lot of seats, and quite frankly, it doesn't make sense. So whether there was interference, don't know, maybe Russia was poking around, but we don't know why such an illogical outcome. And again, I just fall back on logic. It's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's about what's fair. And that's all I'm after for Canada.
And you look at the oil and gas industry in the U.S. and it's booming. Things are going really well in North Dakota. Yet you just go, a couple miles north and things are just totally different. So how is it that the United States can be doing so well at the same time as their neighbor is suffering so much?
The United States has grown their oil production over the last 15 years by a factor of 4. Canada's up 50%. That sounds like a lot. We're 3.5 going to 4.5 million barrels. The U.S. has gone from 3 or 4 up to 11 or 12. I actually am significantly invested in a U.S. oil play that runs out of Calgary. And because it's a Canadian-based company, it's trading at 1 times cash flow. Cheapest oil investment ever. Makes no sense at all. But the U.S., guess what? They have export capacity. First thing they wanted was self-actualization. They now produce enough oil that they can say, screw you, to Saudi Arabia and all the Middle Eastern interests. So because they don't import oil anymore, they're a net exporter. We should be a net exporter, but we're a net importer as a result of what happens in Eastern Canada because we don't supply our own. We should be exporting more than we import. We don't. We failed miserably. The U.S. got its act together, and all due respect to Mr. Trump, I don't want my kids spending time with him, but as a businessman, he's actually created some momentum that the U.S. is benefiting from.
Thank you so much. If you like what we're doing, head.
So, I just want to bring up a few more points that I spoke of in previous videos. So the first one is, again, Brett Wilson has demonstrated his inability to accept separation as a reality. which stands as a point with many people whom I've spoken to. The problem is, how will the East take us seriously if the threat of separation is not real? If the threat of separation is merely a bluff, which if I was in Trudeau's camp, I would see it as a bluff only, and the thoughts and words of a disgruntled, I'm talking from the perspective of Trudeau or Butts here, of a disgruntled province that, has power but doesn't have power. Essentially, there's no power there. They need to take us seriously, which means our threat has to be real. The threat of separation has to be real. It cannot just be, well, we're going to keep discussing. The time for talking is over. The time for action is already past. That is why I look at it like it's a weakling approach with no value yet, no backbone. If we want to make leverage, we need to be prepared to make the step to separation and get rid of this guy. Because, the East, another thing they were talking about is they were confused why Trudeau won the election. If you'll notice, many ridings were won by the Liberal Party, but only, say, by 1,000 votes or less. And I'm looking at this, and I'm going to say it, and I don't care if everybody, you can disagree or not. People seem to forget that Trudeau was bringing in refugees like crazy. But what people also forgot was that he was fast-tracking them to citizenship within, I think, 6 months' time. So where did all those people go? When you look at it, Dinesh D'Souza had this beautiful video that was released years ago where he has, it's like a historical representation, you could say, in acting. In the way that the Democrats would indoctrinate immigrants coming to the country. So the immigrants would come off the boat, and the Democrats would be waiting there for them, handing out pamphlets, and then putting those people up with room and board, and so on, and then giving them the pamphlet that says "Vote for the Democratic Party." And of course, they're still coming in. They're unfamiliar with the government system and whatnot, and it basically was a demonstration of naivete to get those people to vote with the party whom is protecting you. Okay. And I think something similar happened with the Syrian refugees and the Liberal Party. Because when you look at whom are they going to be grateful to allow them to have safe harbor in Canada? And of course they'll say, well, Trudeau, because that's the reality, right? So it's not only gratitude, but I do believe that behind the scenes, because nobody ever talks about it, but surely it must have happened, that those people were at least encouraged to vote with the Liberals. They could vote with whomever they wish, but encouraged to vote with the Liberals and fast-track to citizenship. So that's my idea why it doesn't make sense what happened with Trudeau's election, because I don't believe that Canadians actually elected him. Really. And I say Canadians in the context of Canadians who have lived here for 20 years or longer. So it doesn't really matter to me, because I know that there are immigrants who are, there are refugees who are coming in of goodwill, who want to make a new start for their lives. But what I'm saying is, surely that accounts for some of the, let's call it, variance that happened, the discrepancies that happened with the election that are inconsistent with a prediction about Trudeau losing, let's say. So let's see what else that there's oh yes. So speaking of which, the The NDP also, what Brett was talking about there, people voting for what they thought was more reasonable. There was a great deal of investment in candidates that came out of the NDP, but that just fell short of the mark. See, in some of those areas that we find confusing, that voted for Trudeau, the closest competitor, I think, in most of those ridings, disregarding Quebec, was the NDP. The NDP was a close second, and the Conservatives were a far third place competitor, let's say. So the NDP had favor in there, but they fell short of the mark, despite having a great deal of money invested in their candidates and so on. So we're coming back to the idea of separation. If Alberta wants to be taken seriously, we need to be firm and strong as Quebec was when they threatened to separate. It cannot be something we're playing at a child's game, because we're bluffing and will be called on it. It cannot be a bluff. These people look at the situation like, we can discuss things and we can make things happen with a discussion. No way. Time for discussion over. Make things happen. Make moves, whatever you have to do to prove your resolve to the federal government so that things can get back to order. Because we don't have any legitimacy as a province, I tell you. It's that pathetic. We don't have it. That's why we're in the position we are now. And we haven't had it for years. And the reason we haven't had it is because Alberta refuses to get together and actually... We've paid and paid and paid in the past with complaint, but we still paid. Nobody said, okay, it's unreasonable that we should pay. And if they did so, they did it quietly and they more or less kept their opinion to themselves. Now Ottawa has forced us to the brink of collapse, and now we're only starting now to discuss, well, maybe separation might be a good idea. Maybe. I don't want to push it that far because I don't want to get out of Confederation. All excuses. Forget about your excuses and nonsense. You want to be treated fairly and with respect, then take it. It cannot be just, we're demanding. No. It's like children in a household making noise. Trump already has a lot of children in his household giving him trouble. You don't tell them, it's okay. They just, we'll listen to you. All this nonsense. You tell them, be quiet. Sit down, If you want to be treated like a child, then continue acting like it. If their threat is considered real, then Kenney will have already made inroads to make it a legitimate presentation, I tell you. It cannot be just some fake thing that Trudeau will say, they're not really serious about separating. Because, it's obvious. We must be prepared to make that step to separation. It cannot be an empty threat. It has to be something more. Something legitimate. I look at Kenney, and I said it many times in my previous video, Kenney seems to me to be a federalist. He values Canada as it stands, but if Alberta is to have any backbone and any negotiation leverage, then he has to have more than that. There's no loyalty to this province in a lot of areas in Canada. There is resentment and jealousy. I talked many times with people that I know from Victoria, my sister, the people that surround her. I would classify them as they don't really care about Alberta's success. Let's put it like that. These people are not. We're Canadians, but we're from like a different planet. Let's say the idea is completely radicalized and completely out of tune with what would benefit this province at all. You understand? These are the kind of people that you're fighting in government. Like, they really don't care. As long as they can keep squeezing money out of us, it doesn't matter. Scott Moe, I think, has more resolve than Kenney. I like the way he's approaching it. Like, he's talking about, oh, my people that support me really look up to me to make a severe change here. And I think he's serious about it. Where Kenney is just like, well, we'll have a referendum in 2 years. And screw that. Start talking about serious separation now and make a move. Make several moves. I don't care. It don't matter. The time for discussion is over. How much more are you going to discuss things and waste time? The Liberals keep gaining more and more control. You watch the carbon tax take effect next year. I tell you, that's going to hit people hard that support Kenney, who promised that he'd get rid of it. You know, what are we going to do then? When it costs so much money to heat our homes in the winter and keep driving our cars, you know, like nobody thinks about the natural elements that we need for human life to exist here. You know, you're going to burn wood or paper to heat a house? We will get to that point if we're not serious about this. Like, the time for discussion's over. Trudeau won. We can laugh or cry about it, but it's pointless. Now the issue falls to us. What are we going to do here? What needs to be done here in Canada, in Alberta right now? The rest of Canada can act accordingly. And I tell you, I support anybody who wants to be treated more fairly as a province. Anybody who wants to have a referendum about separation. Because, like, I mean, the power in Ottawa is top heavy. There's too much bureaucracy going on. Too many illegitimate nonsense going on with too many radicals in government that have no sense of humanity and caring for those that they implement the policy, and when enacted to its full power will literally just bankrupt us. And when people have no money, starvation, mental illness, crime, all these things will be a factor that goes into it. And much more than that, because this is supposed to be a modern country. How many of our rights, our freedoms that we enjoy will be destroyed by this nonsense? Like, literally, our way of life as we know it will be gone. And you can say, well, we'll keep paying for it. Yeah, we'll keep paying for it, but for how long will we be able to sustain that? It makes me, it grieves me to see that people are still, even someone like him, whom I want to say I respect him, but like, I mean, it's apathetic almost. Like, we need to have a discussion about what we could do about this. To hell with that. Act, don't speak. If you're going to keep talking and talking, you know, you just give them more time to prepare, more laws to be passed to screw Alberta into bankruptcy, essentially. Because Trudeau already, you know, you can look easily and find ways that he hates Alberta. Like, it's no secret. This is whom you're dealing with. That's the person you're dealing with. So take great care about, oh, we're going to talk and see if they'll negotiate with us. Yeah, right. I'm so tired of hearing it. And I know many people in my province feel the same way. It's like we're hopeless because there's nothing. The people who are in power lack the spine to do the right thing. Right? So, I thank you for your time and attention and for your support. If you feel as I do that we need to very much remove the power from Ottawa and put power here where it belongs, then I would like you to continue to support this channel, and perhaps we can get some more legitimate things moving, because Wexit to me seems to be very immature yet in its execution. And there are many of us whom we look at it as sort of like a hope, but it's not yet a legitimate ray of hope. It's still in discussion, like in an infancy kind of idea. It's an idea that has not yet flourished. But if we are to have the proper power in this province, then we need to do something. Otherwise, we'll have more of the same. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and goodbye.